We're going to be talking today about the Barbie movie. We're going to be giving a little bit of a review on it. For those who haven't seen it, this is going to be a spoiler-based talk, right? So everything we say here, we're going to be divulging all kinds of secrets in the movie. So if you haven't watched it and you want to see it and you don't want us to spoil it for you, then by all means, save our podcast and come back a little bit later and listen to it after you watch it. For everybody else, um, basically, do you want to tell the story, Elizabeth, of the, the Barbie story? Do you remember? Barbie
The
is
Barbie story is Barbie is in her blissful world, um, unaware of uh, the stressors on daily life, such as aging, death, loss, change. None of those things exist because she's a doll, and something cosmic happens where she starts to experience those things, which is first represented symbolically in the movie by her feet going flat and not in the high heel position. And basically, like what happens in the movie is she um contends with this, and she chooses to deal with existential pain and be real rather than staying in a blissful, unchanging existence where she doesn't experience the complexity of human emotions. And that's really that's what happens in this story. Through the
so,
fun vehicle of, of Barbie, uh, historically accurate with all the Barbies and their outfits and everything.
and what were your thoughts as a because I would you agree that this movie is targeted at women more so than men?
Yes, it's trying to it injected some social commentary for sure, and it's trying to be timely, I think, and it's trying to say, "Oh, we're saying something," which I don't think it needed that. I think it could have just told the story, but yeah, it kind of touched on some gender issues, and but then it also said, well, we haven't forgotten about the pain of men. Men are looking for their place in this world of women power. So we have to have sympathy for the men and their fragile egos too. Kind of went that route as well.
Okay. And how by your did you enjoy the film? Was it enjoyable to you?
I enjoyed it. I really wanted to see the Barbie I grew up with on screen, and it was really fun to see the dolls I remembered, the outfits I remembered, the the weird Barbie that we all had that was, mutilated by our older brothers. So yeah, it was enjoyable. But it was also and there was humor in it, which was fun, but it also took me out of the story when that, injected kind of commentary or preachiness came in. I don't tend to enjoy that in stories. So that was a little bit that made it less enjoyable for me.
So it's very interesting to me, and I'm going a little bit off script here, and I apologize for that, but it's interesting to me because up until this point, I genuinely thought that everybody who watched Barbie and the frenzy of Barbie was about the commentary. And this is the first time I've sort of been, I felt like some people would have, were there to watch Barbie,
Oh, definitely, yeah.
right? They
That's what
weren't
I was
there
there
to,
for.
right? They weren't there for, they weren't going, I want to, this commentary is just something I want to be a part of, right? Or whatever. It was more about, yeah, I'm getting to see Barbie. And as long as it wasn't a stupid story about Barbie, right? You're just dumb. And maybe even if it was, people would have still gone to watch
Yeah,
it.
I don't know if the chicken or the egg came first in this story, if it was like, let's make a movie about Barbie, and then the story came out of that, or if the story came and then they said, well, let's use Barbie as the vehicle. But it was the perfect vehicle because when I saw that preview, I was like, I gotta see this Barbie movie. I gotta see Barbie on the big screen, you know. I was super excited for it. So I didn't know anything. Actually didn't want to know what the story was about. I just wanted to see this Barbie movie and then yeah, see how I liked it from there.
So, should I give you my thoughts on it?
Go ahead. Yeah.
So, I I did not want to see a Barbie movie, right? And or a Ken movie because I didn't play with any of those toys, and the only thing I know about Barbie is the commercials. I did not grow up in a wealthy family or even a, you know, I don't even know, as a normal middle class family, or maybe we did. I mean, obviously my father was a professor, but our values were just completely different, and that's just not something that a toy that would have been purchased, and toys were just not things that we got growing up. So I didn't have any emotional connection to it from that perspective. I would I would say that the opposite of Barbie, the guy version of Barbie, which I've gone to watch every single one
Can
of
I
them.
guess? G.I. Joe?
No, not G.I. Joe.
Transformers?
Transformers,
Yeah.
yes.
See, I had brothers, I know.
Transformers is the guy version where it's like it's the nostalgia for the youth.
So can I ask you,
Sure.
when those movies came out, did you not care about the story and say I gotta see this?
Yes, I did not
So
care about the stories and if I went and I watched a Transformers movie and it turned out to be a battle of the sexes movie about how, sort of like a manosphere version of Barbie, I probably would be like, what the heck what am I watching here, right? But I would still watch it. I'd be probably in the same boat that you were in, right? But, oh, that's interesting. I see where they're going with this.
mm,
Whatever. Okay, so before we get too far off track, I want to get your rating of the movie from 1 to 10. And I don't want you to give me a critic rating, right? I want you to give me a me rating, right? So, like I know a few things about you. I know you like Outlander, right? I know you like what's the other one you watch?
Virgin River.
Virgin River,
One of my favorite movies is Bridget Jones's
Bridget
Diary.
Jones's Diary, right? So, right, so and it's one of my favorite movies actually, as
So
well.
good.
I think it reaches everybody. So I guess my question to you is, how would you rate this movie from 1 to 10?
Probably in terms of just my personal enjoyment, would be a 6.
A 6?
Yeah. It's not a character-driven story, it's a theme-driven, and I sort of like getting into characters and feeling a sense of place. It's hard to feel a sense of place when it's like very artificial, sort of, and very whimsical, playful. So, and the kind of the thematically it was forceful. So yeah, it wasn't one of those movies I would watch over and over and tuck into. It was fun seeing, like I said, seeing the things I knew from childhood and knowing, knowing everything they were putting on display, or a lot of it, being like, yeah, I remember that. I know what, and right away seeing the flat foot, knowing right away, oh, something's happening here. Why is she walking flat footed? But in terms of just, yeah, I didn't like love the movie or feel the warm fuzzies afterwards.
Okay. I would give the movie an 8 out of 10. Um, because I thought there were aspects of the movie that were very serious, and those aspects were well done and well acted. I thought the themes were I didn't agree with them, but I thought they were well executed how they were trying to put it together. I didn't think it was too, even though it was forced, I didn't think it was crazy. Um and um and yeah, I thought it was funny when it needed to be. I like Ken and I like what they were kind of trying to do with it. Um the reason I don't give it a 10 out of 10 is because again, parts of the movie where I found to be offensive. It's the best way I could describe it. So I give it an 8 out of 10. I thought, it's a pretty good script, good acting, got a little bit goofy, the whole war part and everything.
Yeah, it
It
was a
was
little
it got a little
goofy.
bit goofy, and but what have you, it wasn't that bad. So so the next thing I have here is the appeal, right? And I think what what I'm curious to know here is what do you think was the appeal of this movie, right? Like why
So yeah, like we touched on earlier, I think
mm,
the appeal was the nostalgia.
the nostalgia basically.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
And also maybe a little that it's like unabashedly like feminine and which is almost like taboo, I think, in some ways now. So the fact that they were going for it with Barbie as a vehicle, I think was like, whoa, and um and even the way all the like kids were going out to see it, boys and girls doing like Barbie, all pinked out, I think was kind of like, it was different enough that it didn't, it wasn't trying to stay too within the lanes kind of in using that vehicle. So that created I think a little bit of excitement and buzz to kind of see what that was about.
Okay. And when you say that it was unabashedly feminine, what do you mean? How was it unabashedly feminine? I didn't feel like it was unabashedly feminine.
Not the movie
So,
itself, but the representation of Barbie. So like Barbie kind of fell out of fashion, like kind of, yeah, I don't know, late 90s kind of body positivity. But I remember seeing a lot of things because it was shortly after I was of like the childhood age playing with Barbie dolls myself that it was like a real woman, if she had the dimensions of Barbie, wouldn't even be able to walk. And like the company actually changed her proportions to like, yeah, so there was all this idea of like Barbie was part of the, negative perpetuation of unrealistic ideals and expectations of women. So then to take Barbie and be like, yes, Barbie was kind of like, okay, it's kind of taking a risk. And so I think, people sort of admire that. Like they weren't using something maybe more like commonly socially acceptable right now. They were using Barbie, who's all, like girly, pretty, even though, but she also, I mean, girls always loved Barbie because she had all the career, she had the pink house, she had all the fashion, there's a lot of appeal with Barbie.
okay. But isn't it possible that the appeal with Barbie, I mean, someone out there created a toy called My Pet Rock. You know what I mean? It's like all these things almost seem to me, or is it possible that these things could be sort of, we're looking at it in reverse, right? Like it's being attributed to all these aspects of Barbie, but the truth is that that it was just like a trend or whatever. Like it just became something that was popular for people to do and popular for girls to do or to play with and whatnot. And there was a sense of status associated with having all the toys with all the different things or whatever, just like with Transformers, right? Like everyone wanted to have Optimus and different, I'm just talking from a guy's perspective, right? Different models and different things and have a whole toy world built based on toys that they were into. Isn't it possible that Barbie was essentially also the same thing, but for girls? It was just something that was marketed to girls, but they used the same sort of like marketing and capitalist principles to drive selling the product.
Well, I guess I can only speak from my perspective. But what I would think is that if it were a marketing thing and have an issue of having those things, that kids would want to collect a bunch of them, and that would be that. For me, I spent hours playing with Barbies, like just setting, playing, and when I say playing, I mean making stories, like them interacting day-to-day life as Barbie. So, no, I don't think it was marketing. I think, I mean, what's not to like about dolls? You can either play being a mother to a doll, and then you're playing out life, or you can play with your future life, which Barbie, playing with an adult doll would represent. You're playing out these stories. So, no, for me it was like very appealing. I loved Barbie. I loved all her outfits. I played with them almost daily. I think in 5th grade, I told myself, "Oh, I'm too old to play with Barbies," and sort of, made myself stop at that point. But yeah, so but in any case, I mean, I don't know if that affects the appeal of the movie or not. But definitely I think some people came out to see it because of those elements of, what Barbie represented, like socially, but then also, personally for those who had Barbie dolls.
Okay, and you sort of bled into the next thing I was going to talk about, which is the themes, right? And and in this case, I don't want to talk about the themes of Barbie, like what the toy represents, right? I'm more interested in the themes that were, the themes that you thought were in the movie. Like, what were they trying to say from your perspective in the movie? And do you agree with those themes?
Yeah, so I saw it like two big things in the movie. So the first that that really struck me was that the theme of the movie seemed to be retelling of my very favorite children's book, which is The Velveteen Rabbit. It was basically like the same story arc from what I could tell. Barbie was, blissfully quote unquote unalive. So she did not experience like joy, pain, fear, the existential dilemma of pending death, loss. Um, but when something happened, some, glitch in the cosmos or what have you, to, propel the story forward, she started to experience those things that come with being human, consciousness, awareness of mortality, um, pain and loss, as well as joy and bliss. So she chose in the movie, and she chose that. She chose like the risk of even losing her perfect life, her beauty, um, all these things. Um, Instead of this perpetual world where you never die, which, let's face it, that's part of the appeal of children and children's world. It's like there's that suspension in childhood where it feels like, nothing will ever change. So and that's how it is with your toys. They don't change. So and then of course in the Velveteen Rabbit, he chooses that. He sees the horse who becomes shabby and, worn out, and and he sees those two rabbits frolicking in the field. That's when he realizes he wasn't alive. So of course, like, it is talking about, what it means to be human, but I think there's also a metaphor of that, um that we can embrace being human, or we can try to cling on to, you know um holding on to everything as it is and not embracing change. So that was the theme that jumped out to me. I'm like, wow, this is the Velveteen Rabbit. But then on top of that, it seemed like there was a layer thematically that they tried to put in there about, yeah, culture and gender issues, like, oh, how bad it is to be a woman and then taking power and control as a woman, but then also and her like shock from being in the Barbie room where it's world where it's centered around, being a girl, girl power, and then going into the real world where men seem to run things. But then when so for Ken, he had the crisis by realizing it was kind of like the reverse. When he saw the real world, he saw how limited he was in his doll world. It was kind of flipped. So so yeah, there was the theme of just like, the gender wars, who holds the power and how traumatizing that is, regardless if you're male or female, and then having empathy for Ken, like, well, of course he likes this world where he's in charge, and of course he wants this. Um, but I mean, those kind of like the whole sex wars thing is always kind of problematic for me because I just see it in general as like there's not one way to look at power, which is, it's not just a capitalist vantage point of, oh, whoever has money or who makes decisions in corporate America has all the power. Like, we're in a balance and we have different benefits and different struggles. So yeah, so that part to me got a little it got a little forced. Um so that did not resonate with me.
So I thought that, um, and I'm gonna give you, and obviously I'm giving you uh, a perspective, and it's a perspective from me living my life as a man, right? So a couple of things. First of all, I I don't think that Barbie she's making a choice, but she's not making an informed choice. She doesn't understand what it's like to be alive. She only perceives life as something that she wants to understand, right? She's not felt pain. She hasn't had her period. She hasn't felt the danger of walking down an alley, and she hasn't she's lived in a world where she's had all the power. She's not, she's not in danger in Barbie land. She's in control, complete control in Barbie land, right? So that's the first thing. So it's not a viable, so whatever message that they're trying to give, in terms of her empowering herself in some way by freeing herself from the box, came off to me as clumsy. Number one, because if you just follow the story along, she's living in a paradise. That's where she starts the story from, right? She's living in this perfect world where she has all the power, all the control in her world, right? As you said, like the Velveteen Rabbit or whatever, she discovers that she's not really alive through magic or whatever. Comes into the real world. When she enters the real world, she realizes that things are a lot different. And once she enters the real world, she's hesitant to go back into her box and go back to being like the old Barbie or whatever for whatever reason, right? But then from my perspective, just looking at it, I guess I felt that the metaphor that they were trying, or the theme they were trying to do, it just didn't make any sense to me on multiple levels, right? And it's part of this overarching narrative that women do things, and all the motivations of women are somehow driven by some patriarchal force coming from men. And it's just not true. It's just not true,
I would agree.
right?
The things that motivate women aren't necessarily the things
They are not.
that motivate men.
They're not. And that's number one. And number two, Men men are men chase women, but men's objectives are not women. It's actually the other way around. It's actually, if you look at it in the grand scheme of things, it's actually women that select men. It's women that are making the conscious choice to engage with men. The default state is that you don't have any, you don't have any woman. And for you to get a woman, you have to go and convince that woman to select you. You're not going and boinking a woman over the head, at least in Western society, right? And just snatching her up and saying, put on high heels and pumps and do this and do that, right? It's actually the reverse. And if there's women out there that are dressing a certain way and behaving a certain way and doing a certain thing, it's not because they're being pressured to do that in the traditional sense by men. It's because they are trying to make themselves the most appealing to men based on just general statistics, right? And we're seeing it till this day, right? I can't tell you how many guys I know that, and we had this conversation, for example, with your nails. I hate your nails. I hate them, but you still got them. Was it a man that that is there's I guarantee you there's no guy that likes those nails. Guaranteed, right? So is that the patriarchy? Is that is that toxic masculinity? No, women do things for, and that's, I don't want to ramble. The bottom line is, from my perspective, I thought that the themes were flawed because I think that women do things because women want to do those things. It's really that simple for the most part. I'm not talking about oppressed women all over the world. I'm talking about the freed women of the West and freed women in countries where crazy things are not happening to them. The women are generally doing the things they want to do. You take a country like where I'm from, Nigeria, everything that's happening here is happening there. Guarantee you there aren't any guys looking for girls with butt implants or hip implants. Guaranteed. It's not because of the men that they're doing it. It's because they think it's attractive. Women like those things and think it's attractive. And that's just what's driving the world.
I
And
mean,
you can come in at any
I
point
have
in
to,
time.
yeah, I have to agree a lot that that we are being fed like this kind of narrative of for the purpose of empowerment that comes from um an overly or purely non-integrated intellectual perspective of that um that everything we're experiencing in humanity as a society comes from societal constructs, societal norms, societal pressures. But society is actually a reflection of the individual and of the psyche as well. So, so I think some of the things that come out of academia about the nature of the world we live in and dynamics between the sexes says, okay, let's study everything from the perspective of us as of a social construct. But like what you're saying is like, well, women may be doing some of these things not from social pressures or societal pressures or because there are these social constructs in place, but because there are maybe more biological imperatives in place, imperatives of the psyche, that it's not, yeah, from the patriarchy, so to speak.
Yeah, and I'm not, and I don't want to, that's I don't want to say anything crazy because I don't want to offend anyone, right? But I'm not saying that there aren't social pressures that affect women. But just because there are social constructs and social pressures that affect women does not mean that the originators of that social pressure or construct are men.
Well, I think
Women
it's
can drive, women have their own social structure. Women have their own, you know how they say that like everybody's a little bit gay, right?
uh-huh, yeah, the
Right?
spectrum.
The
Yeah.
spectrum. So the spectrum drives a lot of mimicry, right? The spectrum drives a lot of mimicry. Admiration drives a lot of like for example, if I might see a muscular guy and I might admire that muscular guy, and that might make me want to say I want to be muscular too. And so that drives that whole behavioral pattern, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to come from women. Are women chasing after gigantic, bulky, bodybuilder type people where their muscles are outrageously big and everything, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's there the point is like we have to I think we have to integrate the different things that are at play. So one of them is societal pressures that kind of take place in the place and time you live in. Yes, that's definitely one of the things, but it's not the only thing.
It's not the only thing. It's not the only thing. And yeah, and I don't, like everybody is entitled to their opinions, but this idea that if I go to school for and study something for 20 years, study something that's ethereal, right? Not something that is not a counting thing, right? Something philosophical, something that's beyond the physical. That if I study it and study it and study it, that it now gives me credence to say that, to speak on its nature, or I'm now become an expert on it. It's as preposterous as thinking that if you study music for your whole entire life or study art for your whole entire life, you're going to be an amazing artist. You're not, those two things don't have anything to do with each other. Certain things, you could be an amazing artist because it just comes from, we don't even know where it comes from. It just comes from the zeitgeist or whatever it is, or some spiritual, who knows, right? And it's not something that can be replicated in a
Yeah.
lab. It's not something that you can go read a bunch of books and do a bunch
Yeah.
of studies of all the artists,
I
right?
think there's something we don't talk about much these days, which is the soul. Everything's like, oh, the brain, and if you do this, this helps learning, and we're kind of like treated more and more like robots or machines. But no,
Yes,
there is this, we're touched with certain gifts.
exactly.
And yeah, and like you said, you can study all the musicians, agree, like study it all, but then there's going to be that kid who can sit at a piano and figure it
Yeah,
out in five
yeah.
minutes and play and music. He's creating compositions in his head, and yeah, it's so everything can't be approached from um from just like yeah, from just an intellectual
You can.
perspective.
And it's not even that it's from an intellectual perspective. It's also the fact that we've sort of like grown into the society where these intellectuals start making these broad statements that are purely philosophical. They're purely philosophical, right? They're statements that anyone can make, that anybody who lives on planet Earth that interacts in this world has a PhD in humanity, period.
From their life.
Okay, from their life, right? And that's just the reality of it. We are all on equal footing when it comes to certain subjects, right? It's just that simple, right? It's just our experience, and we're always in a social experiment where we are the scientist, because we're always analyzing society and reality and making determinations based on that, and using it to inform not just ourselves but our children, our friends and families, right? We are all on equal footing. It's a matrix.
Yeah, we're also synthesizing how it makes us feel, how we're
Exactly.
responding. Like we can even feel those feelings physically in our body. If you feel tension in your gut or you feel your heart expanding, we get all this feedback by how we're feeling, and then we can also synthesize by like how it plays out in our lives, how our decisions, 5 years later. the fallout, how do okay, that gives us a new perspective. That's why a lot of times, people's views change from when they're maybe idealistic, 20-year-olds to 10 years later, maybe they're raising children, paying taxes, and have aging parents, what have you. People's views can change
Yeah,
because
yeah. So, um, getting back to Barbie, and everything we just talked about, all relates to it, and we'll tie it all together here. So, getting back to Barbie, the ending. In the end, Barbie decides um to turn into a real person. She makes a conscious choice. She makes two choices, right? In that in the movie, right? The first is that she rejects the idea of Ken, right? And she rejects Ken, quite frankly. Ken loves her, Ken wants her, she rejects Ken. And then the second is she rejects the bubble that she's living in, and she chooses to come into the real world, right? And be a real woman. So what are your thoughts on that?
so I thought maybe her rejection of Ken didn't necessarily mean that she rejects love, because I thought that it part of part of the idea of becoming real is you can only experience real love when you're real. So she couldn't, it was like the dynamic in the Barbie world was Barbie is the center of the world. So Ken is fixated on her and he's on the side, she's the main character. So she would have to become real to find real love. So I thought
Mhm.
maybe that was her rejection of Ken, as opposed to like saying, woman rejects man when she's fully empowered. That's how I took that. And then yeah, so it's it's the stronger human imperative to choose realness over. I mean, I guess you could compare it to like someone who maybe would want to stay, I don't know, on drugs their whole life, hypnotized by something rather than facing life. So, so she chooses to face life. And now if you're talking about, are you, when you say the ending, are you also talking about the very end scene of her going to gynecologist, or just
Yes, the whole thing.
okay. So yeah, that was an interesting like little exclamation point or period on kind of the that last sentence being her choosing to be real. So um her going to the gynecologist, it works in a couple ways, because okay, it's funny. The fake plastic private parts, going to the real, that's that little humor there. But I guess it also was implying, sexual liberation, and her taking control of that aspect of her life. And again, this is like something that um that we're pushed a lot right now as an ideal. Um, but again, it's not really an integrated look at sexuality. It's a look at it as just an issue of empowerment through, not holistically, right? Right? Not like integrating it with love or commitment or as a sacred thing, or like having an emotional importance. It's, more clinical, medical. So, that like that approach to everything, I don't know, it gets tiresome for me. But yeah, that's how I took that final scene, was to kind of to drive home that point that the movie was emphasizing.
I thought it was cowardice, and I've told you that before. I mean, there's several things about the story that offend me, right? But in this particular light, in this particular case, I thought that Barbie leaving the bubble of a world where the world revolves around her and she's the object of everyone's desire, and becoming a woman who i- is will invariably be, the world is going to revolve around them and they're going to be the object of everyone's eye. How what kind of transformation has been made? Is it that she's going to, I mean, maybe she's going to, if we look to the future, there's a story arc there where she's going to truly come to realization of the choice that she's made, right? But in the space of time that we experience it, she's right back to square one. There's been no change.
What do you mean because that represents a self-centeredness like
No,
as
I think because she's a beautiful blonde hair, blue-eyed woman in the world that's strikingly attractive, okay? And so she's gonna, everywhere she walks and everywhere she goes, people are gonna be falling at her feet, offering her whatever it is she wants. I
this is
mean,
a good point, but I think the movie addressed that a little by showing that when she sat on the bench next to the elderly woman and she looked at her and said, "You're beautiful." Like it showed she saw the beauty beyond like the most obvious kind of beauty. And so and it did also show like she knows she'll age and she won't look like that forever. So I mean it kind of addressed that, I thought, and, like, yes, she's obviously, like, you know, beautiful. She didn't transform into someone more, quote,
yeah,
quote, "normal looking."
that's what should have happened.
You think?
That's what should have happened. That's a choice. That's a real choice. She should have, when she stopped being Barbie, it should have been some normal looking, because that's what Barbie is. All the people that played with Barbie and all the people that had food, what's it called, like eating disorders because of Barbie and all this stuff, none of them
So they said.
look like Barbie.
Mm.
They all look like the regular people. So she should have joined the fold of the regular people.
So that's interesting that the movie didn't want to abandon that. It wanted to hold on to,
Exactly.
like, yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
to
That's my
hold on to
point.
that. So even
So
it couldn't fully commit
yeah, it
to,
couldn't fully commit.
yeah.
Couldn't commit to the message that you're trying to give. That's not, when Barbie leaves the Barbie world and comes into the real world, she has to be a real person. You can't be an angel on earth. You get what I'm saying? You just can't. And so that's where I was able to like endure all the insults on masculinity throughout the movie, unnecessary insults on masculinity, really, really vicious attacks, actually, and not nice at all.
So yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because you're talking to me today about, because my perspective as a woman, but I'd like to know your perspective as a man. And I'll quickly say as far as that, like I see a lot of like the theme of male fragility in movies like, oh well now that like see how fragile men actually are when they only didn't appear fragile because they kept women down, but when women rise, they're actually fragile. And I found that very simplistic and untrue and offensive, but I'd like to know your perspective as because I don't think we need to diminish one to strengthen the other. I think it's the opposite.
Uh,
With femininity is strength and so is masculinity. But yeah, I'd like to know your perspective as a man, how you took all of that, Ken's character and the whole trajectory.
I mean, I thought he was, like all the movies that are being made now, I thought he was an oaf, and he was written like an oaf. And I thought that it was the most, when he comes into the real world and there's all these jabs at masculinity, like as if it's easy to be a man or something like that. Like, oh yeah, the world just falls at your feet because you're a guy, right? That stuff, right? So the oafish nature of every single Ken there, right? And they're written that way. So they didn't have the pardon my French, the balls to actually tell a story. They tell a story with one side as a normal person and the other side as a caricature, right? If you're gonna have the discussion and deal with all the complexities on every side. So so I didn't like that. I thought that the whole, the guys going back and changing the world and turning it into, again, beers and barbecues. Is that what men do? Like, does this person who wrote this story has no has two things. Number one, no clue about the man's world. And number two, no respect for the man's world. None. And I'm gonna tell you right now, even if you go to the most oppressive societies out there towards women, there is no society, I can guarantee you out there, and this is hyperbole, of course, there's no society out there that does not have respect for femininity. There's no society out there that doesn't have that. There's no society that doesn't have reverence for mothers, doesn't understand the role of women. The question is, what is that role? That's what's at play. It's not about it's not about whether or not you are respected as a woman, right? It's about what is it that your job in a society is. In a more traditional society, the woman's job might seem like torture to a modern woman, right? Living in the Western world or in America, actually, because I don't even know if Europe is like this. Living in America where, the war of sexes and the feminism and all that stuff has basically given women a very masculine mindset, right? Where men and women are competing in a paradigm and a structure that's designed for men, instead of women having a structure that's designed for women that they sit in, right? They're going into the world that's not designed for them. And then inside of that world that's not designed for them, they are then saying, hey, things are unfair. Hey, things are easier for you. Hey, I'm being oppressed. Hey, I'm being done this. I'm being done that. It's not because men hate you or want to oppress you. It's because your social structure does not exist. And if I were to ask you or anyone in the world, what does a female society, an all female society look like? No one can answer that question. And
Right,
that's a
can't be
shame.
answered.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, it can't be answered because we wouldn't know, right?
Where is it? Where does it exist? And where is it documented? How much is actually known about women out there in the world? Where's it documented, right? Like every society we're looking at was all societies that, for the most part, as you said, are male driven, like, blah, 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 right? Now, I reject that. I don't think that's the truth. I think that they were created by both men and women, and the men
Yeah.
had an aspect of it, and women had an aspect of it. And when the S hits the fan, the role of men becomes more obvious. And when things are in a peaceful phase, the role of women becomes more obvious, right? That's just the way it is. I think that for the most part, language would have had to have come from women, right? Probably society as a whole is a function of women, right? Farming, settling, all these different things. And by the way, the entirety of humanity is driven by women. If women wanted for humans to be 10 feet tall, only women could do that.
Right.
If women wanted men to be short, only women could do that. You actually control the genetic code of all of humanity.
Yeah. And I suppose you could say part of why societies are structured the way they are is if we all want society to continue and flourish, we need our children to survive and prosper. So, what do children need to survive and prosper? They need shelter and food and protection, but they also equally need nurturing and caring and kindness. They can have emotional stability. So, it's like basically there are these roles, these gender roles where the father would provide some of those things and the mother would provide some of those things. But from a modern perspective, it's looked at as it's more about the individual. Like men, men are in this role because they want power, and women are in this role because power's been taken from them. But maybe it was never about power in the first place. It was about
Precisely.
creating a safe, nurturing place for children so they can grow up and then society will flourish and continue. And all these things need to be done. But in today's discussion, nobody really wants to talk about children or the family or anything. And one thing that was interesting, this is kind of a side note, but you're making me think about it when you're talking about what they saw in the real world. They only saw this dynamic of power. That's what they saw. And
Yeah.
that's what Ken was wrapped up in and loved. But what do real people actually experience when they go into the world? Are they enamored by power, or are they enamored by a passion? Usually people see something like, I don't know, Ken might have seen like the big, when the men were in the construction site, he could have seen the big bulldozer and been like, "Wow, that's amazing," and realized he had a passion for engineering or for,
Exactly.
I don't know, something. And same with Barbie. She could have seen something and been like, "That's what I want to be. That's what I want to do." But they were only observing and feeling the power dynamics. And okay, fine, that's what the movie's about, but that's not the only thing people are about.
Yeah, but that's what the movie is about. And my criticism of the movie is that if that's what you are about, and let's take a step back and let's say that in film and in society, women have been wronged by men, right? Let's just put that out there. I don't agree with it, but let's put that out there, right? I did watch Indiana Jones Temple of Doom, so I sort of understand the sort of like girl character that's just there to scream and go, Indy, that sort of thing, and that's basically that, and be rescued. That's it. That's your job, look pretty, be rescued, scream, and show fear, right? And then the guy is stoic, right? And just, keeps their cool and whatnot. So got it, right? Okay, so now you have an opportunity and you have power, and in this time in the world, to have a real, genuine dialogue about these issues. And instead of having that dialogue, you basically create these caricatures, right? As you said, that have they there's no reason for Ken to even be in that movie other than to be just an oaf.
Right.
He doesn't
Right.
offer any
Any balance.
any
There's,
balance
yeah.
whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's not we're not having a conversation. The movie's not having a conversation. And maybe that's a form of feminism that is sitting behind everything else, which is like this militant feminism that just has, like almost like a hatred for men, because that's what I got from it. I didn't get any love from men, any appreciation for men
until
whatsoever.
until the sympathy is given to men when he becomes sort of the oppressed character. Then it's like there was that little trinket of like, okay, see Ken's struggling now. Towards the end,
Yes,
right? And
yes.
that was the only permission to sympathize with Ken, is when he's oppressed. What about his inherent value? No, doesn't
Yeah,
exist.
it doesn't exist. That's the point. And it doesn't exist throughout the movie. He doesn't have a story arc whatsoever, right? He's just a prop that's presented as a representation you know, of the lack of value of a man, basically, right? That's really what he is. Like he's there solely to be there to adore her, and that's his purpose in the beginning. And when he goes in the real world, you realize that all these guys are that he represents are all once again just just like a function of him. They're really still oafish.
Yeah. Like remember how the men were like making Barbie feel unsafe and being crude, but there wasn't a man who came to Barbie's defense or
That's my point.
protection.
It would have been a great opportunity for understanding between both sides of the coin, right? And it would have, but it needed a person who has some measure of appreciation for men. I mean, that's just a view of how that person feels. We feel like you're in the way. You've outlived your usefulness, your utility. Ken is thrown to the side after years and years of adoring Barbie. And hey, okay, go figure it out by yourself. Right. So
But then if we go back to the very roots of like the Barbie doll and Ken being created, I guess the real perspective of say if we go back to just the roots before the movie, um Ken is there for love. Like he's not the main character. The girl playing with Barbie's the main character. Just got all the careers, all the fashion, yes, but Ken Kendall wasn't made to just admire Barbie, right? Like there's still uh the desire to have love in your life. And another thing that the movie I guess pushed as far as like a feminist agenda is like denial of that. Like love
yeah,
was not there for Barbie. She had no feelings for Ken. Like
yes, none
is
whatsoever.
that how little girls would play with Barbie?
Yeah,
No.
yeah,
No.
exactly. No, and by the way, she's, if you follow the universe, the laws of the universe of the story, she would feel love for Barbie, for Ken, because the person who plays her got married, had a child, and all these
Oh
different things, a
yeah.
little girl.
Yes.
So
Good point.
she would have had
Yes.
this feeling of love because she would have been playing with
That's
her and
right.
Ken together doing stuff. Unless she herself, the underlying character, is almost like the originator of the
Yeah.
sort of like hatred for men. You get what
Right.
I'm saying?
Right.
Like she doesn't, like the mother
Right.
doesn't like men fundamentally.
So she only had her daughter maybe for society, got married and had her daughter for societal
Exactly.
pressure or what have you, but the guy was never important. She didn't experience that
Behind
love
the
or move down the
scenes.
aisle behind
Yeah,
the scenes.
behind
Yeah.
the scenes,
Yeah.
behind everything
No, you're
else
right. That's
when she's by
problematic.
herself,
That's
right?
problematic and that's
Because she's still married in the story. She has a
yeah.
husband.
They
And
just don't show him a lot, right?
yeah, they don't show him, but they show him in the end. They drop Barbie off, right? And so she's married to some guy,
Yeah.
and they're good.
So
Her
it doesn't
issues,
follow.
right? It doesn't
Doesn't
follow,
follow.
right? Her
Doesn't
issues are
track.
more like her mother and losing her mother, and and her daughter. It's completely different. So disconnecting from her daughter, her issues have nothing to do with a man, right, in her life. But she is in a happy marriage that's established. Meanwhile, she's playing with Ken and Barbie, and she's playing with them in this sense where Barbie doesn't care about Ken and yada yada yada. They're not together, whatever.
She obviously came into the real world and didn't really face that issue. She faced the issue of like oppression, but not like as far as beauty standards.
She didn't face any issues of oppression.
Yeah, she did. Remember when she comes into the real world, she sees men are in power and like the guys are harassing her, catcalling her, so
It's just a switch, it's just a shift in power. That's
yeah.
my point. They haven't, like you said, they turned everything about power as opposed to making it about like anything real. It's, like in the Barbie world, they're catcalling the Kens, right? It's the reverse. So the only problem she has really is that she's not the one in charge anymore, right? As opposed to the real issues, right? The real thing, right? Like what is really bothering her about the real world? She's still a Barbie in the real world.
Well, she's no, she's still Barbie as far as looks, but she's not Barbie as far as the her being the center of the world as far as again like the power dynamic. That was the thing that changed. And then again, like I said, that was the layer kind of put on top of the movie, but underneath that there was the more genuine story of like the problem in the real world is if you go on a deeper level than what they tried to say about society, is that being real presents problems of
Okay, but let
pain,
me
heartache, aging, death, all of all of that love, heartbreak. That's so. So I think that was the more root story of the movie. Is the Velveteen Rabbit story, in my opinion.
um I mean just the same. I mean I felt like I liked the movie. I enjoyed the movie. Uh and it was thought provoking because the model that they present of the world, the real world, even though it's it's a caricature. We you know it is the world we live in, right? It is the world we live in, and 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 yeah, I get it. I feel like it was a bad choice for them to use someone attractive like that to play that role because to me it shows a level of hypocrisy, right? For
Mhm.
the that just it doesn't make any sense,
Isn't that
right?
funny though that maybe the fantasy shows we still cling on to some measure of fantasy? So even a movie where you're trying to be like real and make these statements, we still want the little fantasy that you're still a princess. The main character is still a beautiful princess. Like
Yeah.
so, maybe that's telling more of human nature that they didn't fully commit to.
Well, they probably should have. The ending should have had a normal woman. And I mean when I say a normal woman, they should have put a person who's not even an actor. They should have had that old woman almost be you get what I'm saying? They should have just used a normal woman to sort of like really illustrate the choice that Barbie is making. They just missed it, number one. And number two, is Margot Robbie, is she like the best actress in Hollywood?
I mean, I get she sort of embodied Barbie. I get it.
Well,
It is a Barbie movie.
the point I'm trying to make is that like you is that you can't you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't live in a world where you take where you gain all these because majority of women prey on other women. It's actually other women that are being exploited. It's not men that is really causing the problem. It's just a reaction to a world that they create. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, here's what I mean. She gets roles because she's beautiful, right? She doesn't get roles because she's the best actress. She gets roles because she's beautiful. There's other countries out there nowadays with Netflix and stuff like that. You can watch movies from other countries and you can clearly see that in the United States, beauty is
It's
a
more so the
major
looks,
factor.
yeah.
Okay?
Like British
Yeah,
television,
British television is not
yeah.
like that.
So very just normal
Yeah,
people
normal
playing the
people.
roles, yeah.
Yeah, that can act.
Like the keeping up
Yeah,
appearances. They're just these old
exactly.
ladies,
Thank you.
that everybody's
Right?
enjoying watching.
And it's just not, so it's like, so to me, again, it's like, she produced the movie. She pushed the movie out there. She got the writers. She approved the story. So you're putting this message out into the real world, right? And it sort of goes to the overarching point that I'm trying to make, and I want to know how you feel about it. But she's putting the story out in the world about all this freedom and this, that, and the other thing. But there is a responsibility when you're an artist and you can reach millions of people and you have such a loud voice. There is a responsibility to make sure that you are saying responsible things, right? It's not, it's almost like like Karl Marx and all these people that you just say things out into the world. Next thing you know, people are being Billions of people are dying over it, right? So Barbie, even as beautiful as she is, she's gonna grow old. The privilege she has is gonna slowly but surely disappear over time, and the choices that she's made are going to become more and more of have more of an impact on her life. That is a reality for women, for people all over the world. Pushing this agenda of, when you're like the most beautiful person in the universe, and brainwashing the masses into thinking that not every woman looks like you.
But that's sort of accurate. That's sort of it's accurate because the place this issue's being pushed, where we're talking about how disadvantaged, say, women in this scenario are, is the place and time in the world where women are most advantaged. Um, and certainly from the metrics that they're referring to. So there, I guess there is something being missed there, right?
Indeed, there is, Elizabeth, but we will have to save that topic for another day. Barbie is streaming now on Max and can be purchased on iTunes, Google Play, and all other digital distribution outlets. If you have the time and money, please go out and watch it and give us your thoughts on the movie. Tune in every Sunday for a brand new episode. Till then, keep your thinking caps on.